Grown black folks talk. The sixth trait of regressive people that is to be avoided in yourself or the people you hang around with. Because if you manifest any of these six, and Lord help you if you combine them, you need to work on yourself and you need to get away from people that practice them. Because these are traits that in a knowledge-based economy, in a communications age, will keep you from getting where you need to go in life. In the last video, I spoke about regressive people find it very difficult to be able to listen and process without having to react emotionally and inappropriately, and how this leads to losing a lot of opportunities to have people share things with you, can also lead to violence. This is a very, very quick way of doing this. Today, we're going to talk about a trait that actually you would think would go earlier, but I put it where it is because it's worthy of a separate conversation. And it happens because if you fail on the first five, this sixth one is kind of an indication that things are sort of advanced, because after a while you're going to realize you're not getting anywhere. Your friends have realized they're not getting anywhere because they're not confronting these front five: entitlement, ingratitude, greed and sloth, the need for instant gratification, willful ignorance, inability to listen. And if you have any of these front five working in your life, you're not getting anywhere. You're watching other people pass you. And here's the other thing. Then we're going to come to petty jealousy. Also often manifested by gossip, but petty jealousy is in a class on its own. Now, these front five, a lot of us manifest. I'm not talking about if it happens from time to time. We're human. So, there's going to be days where our desire for something exceeds our willing to work for it. I call it big eyes and little muscles. We all do that sometimes. Sometimes we forget to say thank you. Like if I try on this video, I have to actually remember to thank you for watching, because I'm not entitled to you watching me. There's a million other content creators you could be watching. But sometimes if I'm really into my subject, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm getting close to 20 minutes. I gotta go. You might forget. Life happens, we understand. But as habits of life, if you manifest the first five things I've talked about, you're going to begin to see yourself falling back. And so instead of most people looking at these five and notice that they're falling back, they go into number six, which is jealousy or envy, if you will, of wanting. Now we're not worried about how do we improve these things that are holding us back. Now we're going to try to make sure we're going to be mad at other people for managing their stuff and getting ahead. And if necessary, we're going to attempt to hold them back. See, gossip and personal violence are two sides of the same coin. In the Black community is almost a well-known story that someone who is about to get out and get ahead, a young man, maybe about to get a scholarship, maybe about to get advanced, and he'll have his knees shot out or be killed. And if you ask someone why they did it, he was going to leave us. This is also why African American Black folks that are doing well are not always sharing with the people around them, so the benefit does not transfer deep into the community, because of the jealousy aspect. It can get you hurt or killed. It can get people going out on social media scandalizing your name, like the old song says, because people become jealous instead of looking at ways that they can advance. Now, I need to do a series about the ways to progress, but one of the ways to progress is to to avoid falling into the reasons why people do not progress. If you're doing any of these things, it doesn't matter what I tell you to do to progress, because these things are going to hold you back. So let's deal with what we have to deal with first. But instead of people being willing to look in the mirror and see where they need to change, they tend to look at that other person who's beginning to get ahead, and they tend to want to hold that person back however they can. Envy. Because I believe it was Martin Luther King that expressed it, talking about the envy that makes up a great deal of racism in America. You cannot hold someone down without being down there with them. If you're worried about what the person next to you is doing, that's taking your energy from keeping you to do what you need to be doing. You cannot do both. If you're plotting on bringing down someone else, that's time you're not spending helping yourself get up. Now, it's necessary to mention the Black community that some inequality that we experience has to do with the injustice that is unredressed of 13 generations of our ancestors having their labor taken from them without compensation. So there are some things that people look at, and there's always going to be what I call a resentment hangover, because as human beings, to know that this was done to your ancestors and to know that the people that inherited all the advantages have no interest in moving the country to do something to deal with this injustice, and that we are supposed to continue to be treated at times as less than full citizens of the United States and continue to struggle when our labor made everything else possible, that's going to cause a resentment hangover, because as human beings, we don't like to be treated unjustly. But that said, what do you do with that? And a lot of times, the resentment that we have toward members of communities we think are doing better are doing on a macro scale what we also sometimes do to one another on a micro scale. The thing about it is, it's human, but it's not functional. It's not functional because resentment and jealousy toward anyone else never build anything. There's a lot of trouble in the Black community toward different groups of people, and everyone is presuming the other person is ahead of them, and they're both in the same communities, they're both in the same amount of trouble. And the people that suffer from this the most is actually the generation of the children. Because if everybody's mad at everybody else, nobody's building anything. See, what happens is if you don't address, and then let me talk about your friends. All of us have friends, friends of our choosing. But a lot of times, friends help to keep each other from dealing with their five because we're all nice and comfortable with each other. The first 5 traits I've described. But then as soon as one friend makes a change, maybe deals with one of these traits or another one of these traits, and begins to move ahead, then the rest of those friends that don't want to make those moves are now going to do their best to grab that crab and pull them back into the bucket. This is the crabs in the bucket phenomenon. This is the crabs in the bucket phenomenon described. The thing about crabs in the bucket that nobody seems to talk about, those crabs are in the bucket in the deep blue sea. They came from the deep blue sea. They're in the bucket because they're about to be tossed into boiling water, killed and eaten. All of them. So unless the crabs can get over themselves and help each other out of the bucket, they're all going to be eaten together. And see, this is the thing that people do not understand. I live in San Francisco, California. So let me tell you something. Take any of these 6 regressive traits. Take that last one, jealousy, and have jealousy pull back the ones that are trying to make it out, who might, if they were not having to deal with the consequences of that, be willing to reach back. I live in the poster child for what happens on the other side of gentrification. Because if you're not functional, Justin Herman in 1970, this dear friend of Richard Nixon, said, "This land, San Francisco Western Addition, is too valuable for poor people to live on it." Now, he could have said Negro, which is what he was really talking about, because that was who was gentrified off of it. But it was 1970, I believe, and civil rights had happened. He knew he couldn't say that, but you can see what happened in both San Francisco and West Oakland at this time, and you know who he was talking about. Well, that's still the settled attitude. If you are in a dysfunctional Black community, just understand that the land that your whatever you're doing sits on, there's already a plan in place. And if you're not a functional community, someone already has a plan to get everybody, you and everyone you know, off of that. And if you're not ready to adapt to that, you will be scattered to the 4 winds. So while everybody's sitting up here being jealous of those who are a little ahead and doing their best to hold them back and doing their best to bring them down, the forces of gentrification keep marching. Because there are people in this country who what they can do with their envy is that they can make it work because they have resources to do so. And we don't. And this is why hanging around with regressive people will get you killed, slow or fast. Because one of the things that shortens people's lifespans is the grief and the regret of losing the things that they had worked for and built. People who are jealous of you, who you allow to hang around, are working on this for you because they're going to hurt you and they're going to put you in the way of being hurt by other people. And if you are one of these people, while you are so busy worried about the person near you who's getting ahead, you don't see that someone is gaining on you from behind that you really need to be more worried about. Time and age. Forget white people. Time and age. You are running out of time and you are getting past the age of being able to do the things you actually could be doing. And if you would calm down about your friend, that friend may be willing to turn around and help you. This is possibly the most dangerous habit. I mean, we talked last time about not listening and reacting before you even process what's being said, and a set situation is very dangerous because violence can pop off in a minute. But this one is dangerous in a more subtle way because it'll have people out here trying to hurt other people because they're jealous. But it also leaves the community vulnerable because, again, what we're fighting amongst ourselves, other people are plotting on everything we have. As my pastor's wife says, there are always going to be people that look at what you have as a black person and believe and will act like you don't need to have that. So you're busy fighting among yourself because you're jealous of this one and you're jealous of this one. Somebody's planning to take away whatever it is that you're jealous of and whatever you have too. That's reality in the United States of America. That's not going to change anytime soon. So, if you are a person who indulges in envy, or if you're around people that indulge in envy and your turn just hasn't come up yet, you have to deal with yourself and get away. This is one of the most dangerous traits. Like I said, reacting without responding, without listening is very dangerous, but jealousy is dangerous if you indulge it. Or, of course, if you're around people that are like this, because you will be the victim at some point. Very, very dangerous trait. And when you see people that are manifesting jealous behavior, now I will do a part 2 on this because recognizing this one is important in your life, fast or slow, can depend on it. So I will do a part 2 of this, which I'll put up tomorrow or after the weekend because I think we would have gotten out to another weekend by the time I post these up. So I'll do a part 2 on trait number 6 because you need to know how to recognize it. All right, stop here, but I'll be right back. Well, I'll probably be back tomorrow by your watching of it. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.